That means that we're going to talk about how we decarbonize our societies with such a vector for transformation and transportation and mobility can be. And we're going to do it across two panels. In the first panel, we're going to talk about active travel. We're going to talk about what does it mean to walk and to cycle in our cities, and what are the challenges and the opportunities behind it when our local government and regional government practitioners try to make it happen. And then we're also going to talk about zero-emission vehicles. So as you can see, we're going to touch upon what some of you who perhaps are experts in mobility could recognize as the avoid, shift, and improve framework. So we're going to talk about really avoiding non-necessarily motorized trips. We're going to talk about shifting people from the use of private car to public transportation, to mass transit. And we're going to talk about improving efficiency of vehicles, of different vehicles. But before I continue, who am I? I am Maruxa Cardama. By training, I am an urban and territorial planner. So I'm one of these intruders who came into the mobility and transportation field, coming from actually working over 18 years in cities. I've been a local government official myself, and over these years I've been working with local governments and national governments and NGOs and philanthropies in different corners of the world, particularly in the global south, to try to come up with public policies and with capacity projects and multi-stakeholder alliances, which hopefully could help us all go into a path of sustainable development for a human paradigm of development. I currently hold a position in SLoCaT. SLoCaT stands for Sustainable Low Carbon Transport Partnership. It's an international NGO, a multi-stakeholder partnership that gathers together over 90 members from big associations of public transportation or railways to NGOs, philanthropy, the private sector, think tanks, and so on and so forth. And what we do is that we operate at that global scale, at that global level, trying to enable action and knowledge towards a real change and push for sustainable low-carbon transport, and we do so primarily with a geographical footprint at developing countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. But I want to know who you are. So this is not just about who am I, or who our panel will be. Tell me, raise of hands to make sure we keep you awake. North America citizens. Okay. Latin America, Caribbean. Okay. Africans. Oh, I guess we have one hand. That's excellent. Phenomenal. Europeans. Okay, ouch, we are a majority. Asians. I'm not going to go into sub-regions, though I know that I would need to honor the diversity of Asians. Local government representatives. Okay. National government in the house. Planners, urban planners, transport planners. Very few. Private sector, working on technology in particular? I'm curious on technology. Okay. Working on infrastructure, development for mobility, NGOs, philanthropy? No philanthropy. Interesting. Development cooperation agencies, bilateral donor agencies. One hand. Who have I left behind? I've left multilateral organizations and others. Who have I left behind? Universities, academia, absolutely. I was keeping you awake. Thank you very much for that. Good, good, good. So let's go back to the topic of our session. I was saying sustainable mobility, and what we know is that, in fact, the traditional ways in which we are moving people and goods in cities are not working anymore. They're really getting us completely against what we should be doing in terms of climate action and in terms of social cohesion. And we actually know that the energy-related emissions of the transport sector today, as we stand, represent 23%. But the trajectory that is projected by 2050 is tremendous. It actually raises that volume of CO2 emissions up to 80%. We also know that active travel and micromobility have sprung, a bit like mushrooms, isn't it, in different cities and in different geographies of the world. And they are sexy. They don't require a lot of infrastructure. They don't create a lot of congestion. They don't require a lot of cutting-edge technology per se. Is this good news or bad news? How do cities cope with this? How do they regulate? What type of frameworks they put in place? What governance mechanisms can cities and regional governments put together to maximize the intermodality across these different modes? We also know that many national governments and many manufacturers of vehicles are actually going into the zero-emission vehicles. They are really trying to steer the production towards there. There is a lot of different implications for it. Do we have the right fiscal and regulatory frameworks to maximize what a transition towards zero-emission vehicles could mean? This is very much what we're going to try to tackle this afternoon in the two different panels. I'm going to moderate the first one about active mobility, and Christine Musselin, who's here with us, she is the senior editor of Smart Cities Dive. She's going to be moderating the second panel. In Smart Cities Dive, actually, Christine is handling a team of editors, and she's doing anything that's got to do with mobility. Mobility, connectivity, social cohesion, that's what she actually supervises in Smart City Dive. Some of you might know her from her previous edition job at Waste Dive. So, with no further ado, let's get now deeply into our first panel, and it is my honor to call on stage to please join us the three members of this initial panel to talk about active mobility, to talk about walking and cycling. So, come on, warm up the room a bit, and let's do a round of applause, not out of protocol, but out of keeping you awake and keeping everybody warm and cozy. So, please, Fernanda Rivera, General Director for Road Safety and Sustainable Urban Mobility of Mexico City. Join us. Yeah, don't be shy. Come on, perfect. So, Lilijana Madjar, she's the Director of the Regional Development Agency of the Ljubljana Urban Region in Slovenia. And last but not least, to make sure that we have gender balance, we've got Mr. Dale Bracewell, who is the Manager of Transportation Planner of the City of Vancouver. So thank you very much to the three of you. As you can see, the good news as well is that we're not going to stay in a particular geography of the globe. We're actually going places. And this is very exciting. Not only we are going places, but we're actually going to different levels of government. We're going to local governments, and we're also going to regional governments. So we are going to tackle these discussions about active mobility with that city-region perspective, with that territorial perspective that it's so essential for things to work. And we're going to start, as I said, talking about walking and cycling, taking a bit into consideration the fact that these are rather space-efficient modes of mobility with minimal infrastructure requirements. They are very positive in terms of social cohesion, but still their use across the globe is very different, isn't it? We know that in average globally, more or less it's a third of walking and cycling represents a bit like a third of the mobility across the globe. There's a few countries in which that split mode goes all the way up to 70% or 80%. But we also do know that in developing countries, if you don't walk or if you don't cycle, you're really excluded from urban opportunity, from economic opportunity, and from social access, because that's really the only way in which many people can access these opportunities. And we also know, as we were saying earlier, that what is called active mobility is really creating a mini chaos in some cities. We have seen in the past recent years the eclosion of the e-KK scooters, and how many cities are actually struggling to regulate and to cope with them. So there is a set of questions that we shared with Fernanda, with Lilijana, and with Dale in the preparation of this segment. And I'm going to read them out to you so you can see what is the backdrop against which they're going to try to frame their presentations in this daily challenge and this daily opportunity to really maximize active travel in their cities and in their regions. The questions were about how do active travel and new micromobility services improve the lives of citizens and their daily commutes? What are the challenges that are there to actually removing cars from cities? How do cities go about governance, about regulating for all these? How does technology help us maximize the type of information and the good use in the benefit of citizens? So this is the backdrop against which our three eminent local government and regional government practitioners are going to tell you how they deal with it at home. So we're going to get started with Fernanda. She's going to take us to Mexico City. The floor is yours, Fernanda, please.
Perfect, thank you. Well, thank you, Maruxa, and thank you, all of you. I'm Fernanda Rivera. I'm from Mexico City. The first question, how many of you have been in Mexico City? Of course, me. Well, it's nice to have people that have visited my city. I'm going to speak about what we're doing about active mobility in Mexico City, how we're promoting cycling and walking in our city, and all the public policy that is involved. Do you have a clicker? Okay? Yeah, perfect. I'm ready. What's our mobility strategy? In Mexico City, we want to reduce 30% of the total emissions with the transport sector. We know that the transport sector is one of the most contaminant or pollutant sectors in the world. So we want to, one, reduce motorized trips. We have an advantage in Mexico City. Only 2 out of 10 trips are made by car. and 80% of our trips are made by walking, cycling, and public transit. So we just want to keep people in these types of modes. How do we do it? We want people to change and to maintain in this type of transport. Why? Because it's zero emission or it's more environmental friendly. And of course, we want to improve technology. We want more electrified vehicles. We want a better city in 6 years. How are we doing in walking? 23% of the total trips in Mexico City are made by foot. But the intersections, they're really dangerous. 50% of the road deaths or injuries are pedestrians. So we need to walk in a road safety strategy where we have better and safer intersections that prioritize pedestrians. This is a case in Mexico City. As you see, we didn't have even the sidewalk painted, so we have everything. Also, we want a safe school program. We're investing in 66 different corridors that are 10 medium school because we want students being safe. So we're changing these pedestrian bridges that we have in Mexico City for crosswalks, level surface. And we have this plan in this year to recover 37,000 square meters for pedestrians. We're making all this public space recovery in different areas of the city, not only in the central zone, this hipster zone, but in the peripheric zones that is the lowest income areas in our city. And what about cycling? Mexico City has shown to these big cities, we have 9 million inhabitants in our city and 14 million daily trips, that cycling could be an option even in these mega cities. So I think that Mexico City experience for the last 12 years is a successful city that has a lot of cyclists. What's our goal? To have 3% of the total trips in the city made by bicycle. Why bicycle? Because it's a zero-emission vehicle. Why bicycles? Because we have a health problem in Mexico City. 7 out of 10 people are obese or overweight. So we need to promote active mobility in our city. Our goal is to have 600 kilometers of cycling infrastructure. We currently have 242 kilometers, 16 bicycle parking facilities to promote intermodal trips with public transit, and to increase our bike share system that is the largest bike share system in Latin America. It's Ecoeasy. And how we're doing? This is Mexico City experience. We have 242 cycling segregated lanes. This is one of the examples of a good quality infrastructure that we have in Mexico City. We have this case where we have planters, so we can also have this adaptation climate change strategy implemented in our cycling infrastructure. We know that every cycle segregated lane we build duplicates the number of cyclists on the streets. I could tell this is Amsterdam, but it's not Amsterdam, it's Mexico City. We have 5 parking facilities. They're completely free. You can use it with the transport card of our city, and they attend the peripheric areas where people invest 35% of their income in the daily basis transport. We have this for 400 spaces, and these little ones for 128 bicycle spaces. And they're completely free. They have surveillance. We have a policeman taking care of the bikes because everyone that is a cyclist here wants to have their bike back every time they leave them. This year, we're planning to have an Ecobici bike share new bidding process. We have operated for the last 10 years Ecobici. We have 480 stations and 64 million trips. 10 years ago, everyone was really skeptical about Mexico City and cycling. A bike share system was this crazy idea about having bicycles on the streets. In these 10 years, we have had only 63 stolen bikes. So we have shown that Mexico City is an amazing place for bike share. So we're doing a bidding process next year to have better technology and to expand the system, almost duplicate the system in our city. And what about dockless regulations? We've just implemented these regulations because we want to get the best of this new technology. How we get the best of this? Getting the data, where people are willing to go, where are they traveling. So we established a cap where the companies have to have 6,300 bikes and scooters in the city, and they paid a fee for the city. We passed from the picture in the left to the picture in the right. We're building these arrival hubs for all this new technology because we want public space being respected, but we also want active mobility promoted in our city. So we're working with the companies, we're working with the neighbors, we're working with the users, so we can have the best experience in Mexico City dockless strategy. All the information is public. And in every Latin American city, you have to see and change the way bicycles are perceived. A lot of cities in our country see bicycles as lower income people are the ones that can use it, are the ones that cannot afford a car. We want this to change. So we have an open street program that happens every Sunday in Mexico City, which is amazing. This is a picture of Paseo de la Reforma, one of the most beautiful avenues in Mexico City. A lot of people say we close the streets. We say we open the streets for pedestrians, for cyclists, for runners, for people that want to have this physical activity every day. We have 80,000 attendees every Sunday that go and recover the public space for free, and it's a government initiative. Also, we have a bike school because we want people to respect cyclists. This is our bike school for transport operators. Every Saturday, all the bus drivers go and attend this mandatory bike school where they take 4 hours lessons to learn how to respect a cyclist in Mexico City. It's amazing. They get on a bike and the bus passes by so they can understand what's the feeling of being a cyclist on the streets. Also, we changed our camera fines project. Instead of paying with money, people are now paying with time. And the time they invest, they go to a bike school. So the transit violators, now they learn all the rules that are changing in our city. This is something really new. It has been implemented for the last 3 months, but I think it might change the way we see city. And we need to invest in the future. We need to make kids aware of how cycling can change the perception of the city, how cycling can change the way we get to know our own city. So we got 10 different bike schools for kids and also for adults. We have a big gender gap in Mexico City. Only 22% of the cyclists are women. So we really want to duplicate this number in the next 6 years. So we have a bike school especially designed for women, so we can get them on a bike, we can get them on the streets. And last but not least, you cannot talk about active mobility if you don't think about public transit and the combination with it. So we've made a great effort to have an integrated public transit system in Mexico City. We have 12 different subway lines. We are building we have trolleys, we have electrical bus, that is the one on the right. So we want Mexico City to change. We want to increase the quality of the public service. We want that active mobility is an essential part of daily trips in our amazing city. And hopefully you will be visiting Mexico City after this talk, because we want more people enjoying the beautiful city that we have. And the best way to know a city, as Ernest Hemingway said, is by biking. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Wow. Wow. How many things in 10 minutes? Pretty impressive also to see how Mexico City is tackling the very many challenges that other cities have got. I mean, from actually bringing together urban planners and transport planners to putting everything in one single card for use, to tackling gender, to changing that perception of the city through this bicycle. Pretty amazing. So let's go to Ljubljana region now, because there's a lot there as well. And the beauty of the example that Lilijana is bringing us is, let's remember, it takes us out of the jurisdiction of a region, of a city, and goes farther, isn't it, into that vertical integration of work between different levels of government. Over to you, Lilijana, please.
Yes, warmly welcome from Slovenia. How many of you have been in Slovenia? Many? Small. It doesn't work for the moment.
I think you got it.
Yes? Okay, it
perfect.
Works. 2 million country, from big city to small country. And I will introduce you sustainable mobility. And in this frame, what are we doing on cycling and walking? So we go even in a smaller area in Ljubljana urban region. This is the most developed part of Slovenia, connecting 26 municipalities, including Ljubljana, European Green Capital 2014, and Velo City next year. So invited all to Ljubljana next year. And Ljubljana is also a center of Slovenian business, cultural, research and educational institutions, and of course governmental institutions. And this is the main reason that we have what you see on the map, more than 120,000 commuters daily coming into Ljubljana. And this is one of our challenges if we want to establish sustainable mobility in the region. So we need improvement in our public transport. Excessive car use is what we are facing, underutilized potential of walking and cycling, lack of regulation in freight transport, and missing of inclusive planning. I must tell that from these 120,000 commuters, the majority is coming into Ljubljana with a personal car, and that in car is in average a little more than one person. So Slovenia is ranked on the first place in Europe by the ratio of household income we spend for the transport. It's 16%, so you know where we are. But we are facing all these problems and addressing in the region more than 12 years. So we prepared studies, and we are very proud of our achievement. For example, we implemented park and ride network in the region. We prepared, or we have city bus lanes prolonged into region, bike share system, e-vehicles on call in pedestrian zones, new dedicated bus lanes, then expanding pedestrian areas, electric transport on demand, electric car sharing. And we are most proud that this year we succeeded in a country integrated public transport. But we know in the region that we can do more and even better. And this is why our agency initiated preparation of SAMP on the regional level. So this is the first sustainable urban mobility plan on the regional level. And all the 26 municipalities approved it and co-financed it. So we've got first such a document in the region. And we had quite an interesting job because, first of all, we had to create a process. So, in fact, we adopted the regulation for the municipality SAMP. Then we had to prepare state-of-the-art in the transport in the region, create a vision, create strategic challenges and objectives, action plan, and what is coming in all next years is, of course, implementation. And we did it in participatory way. This means that in all process, we included all key stakeholders and public, with interviews, with workshops, with online survey, and also with online GIFs portal so that everybody could create the best solutions. So I explained to you why we did it and how we did it, and how we structured it in 5 pillars. A pillar of walking and cycling, of public transport, of motorized transport, freight transport, and inclusive planning. In each pillar, we first of all looked and put state-of-the-art, then achievements and strategic objectives, and in action plan, also project, actors, time frame, and financial frame. So, in fact, on one place, we have everything that is needed in the region for the sustainable mobility. There is so much I would like to tell you, but I will just present you the pillar of cycling and walking. So, if we want to improve cycling in the region, first of all, we need appropriate infrastructure. In this moment, on the regional level, less than 1% of people is coming into Ljubljana with bicycle, but in the city, it is more than 11%. So this means that we need appropriate infrastructure, appropriate network. And it is exactly right moment because in next years, on the national level, it will be completed the network of national routes, long distance, main and regional. And on the other hand, our municipalities will invest more than 35 million of euros into inter-municipal routes that will be complemented to the national network, because this is the end of cohesion period, and these are more or less cohesion funds. Then what we need still is improvement of the intermodal points, and we need to improve and adjust all the infrastructure for e-mobility, because our region is flat, distances are small, and it's almost ideal that people start coming to Ljubljana with e-bicycles. So this is, and of course, all the time we need a lot of promotion of healthy living, of cycling as mode that is the best for, and walking, of course, for everybody. So we did the similar for all the pillars. And we are here today. So today we are promoting our SAMP to public and to stakeholders. And investments must come in next year, next decade. So me personally, I'm aware that it's a big added value that we have all needed projects evidented on one place with needed sources to implement them, because if projects are well prepared, then there is much bigger chance that the money investment coming from different budgets will come to our region. We learned, and this is my recommendation to everybody, that cooperation is needed, because Ljubljana is a small city, and solutions for the public transport cannot be done by Ljubljana itself. It's needed this cooperation with municipalities. They are all even smaller. All 26 municipalities have a little more than 550,000 of inhabitants. So we have to work together. And in sustainable mobility, money should come from different budgets. So from national budget, the more time and money consuming will be investment in modernization of railways. It's needed, it's backbone of our public transport. From municipal level, so we are this coordinator among different levels. Then what is another challenge is that different sectors are important while we are talking about sustainable mobility. We are talking about infrastructure, we are talking about environment, about Ministry for Finances. We are also coordinating different sectors. So we are in this role. When somebody asks me, Lily, what are you doing? I say, my job is never-ending negotiations, but I never stop, and achievements are here. So I'm sure that we are building a green and sustainable region for people and space in advanced and innovative region. And warmly welcome, come to Ljubljana next year. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Lilijana, for illustrating those challenges that prevail, isn't it, about coordinating horizontally between different departments across the same government, and then going beyond your jurisdiction to coordinate also with different levels of government. Thank you very much as well for bringing the SUMPs. They exist, it is feasible, it can be done, and they direct investment, they direct infrastructure, they set a course for direction. So thank you so very much.
It is translated also to Hungarian language, not only to English. So I have few English pieces here if you are interested, and my business card, so you can contact us. I think it's really good model. It can be used very easily.
Thank you. So last but not least, so we're going to go from Europe. We've been in Latin America. We're now going to Europe. And now we're really going to take a last tour to go to North America, to go to the city of Vancouver. And Dale, you're going to tell us what's happening there. I know there's a lot going on walking on cycling, and you're guilty of it.
There's a lot going on, but I want to start with a story for the esteemed panel on active transportation, and in honor of the very limited number of academia that are here today. So I'm actually by profession an engineer, and when I was meeting with our health researchers, they asked me what I really did, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm actually a planner as well, so we like to say I'm a plangineer, and they said, no, you, Dale, are an enabler of social connectedness. So I'm going to come back to that, but that's what we are. We are enablers of social connectedness. So on behalf of the City of Vancouver, I'd like to tell you about some of the things that we've been able to do as it relates to active transportation, walking and cycling and rolling. And so in 2010, when I started leading and managing an active transportation team for the first time, we came up with this vision and this mission where really we wanted to make that connection to enabling our residents and residents that could be in your city as well for happy and healthy living. But it's just an honor to be here halfway across the world to share in this vision, where I'm going to actually talk a little bit about what did it mean to actually want and desire actually a world-class active transportation network. I'm also a policy wonk. I'm not just a plangineer. And so I do like to point to, in Vancouver, we have a long-range transportation plan called Transportation 2040. What matters about that is for 20 years, we have planned in the hierarchy of modes, walking and cycling as the premier and the first modes that we need to think of as City of Vancouver staff. And so where we're headed for is 2/3 walk, bike, transit, but ultimately it's that growth of the walking and the cycling shown in green that we're getting ready for. And so walking itself, what we want to do is we want to make it safe, convenient, and delightful. Now, safe and convenient is something as an engineer I've been doing for a long time, but I really needed to learn how do we make that delightful. And really, thank you, so many of you from Europe. What we really needed to learn in Vancouver is how do we make it vibrant? How do we help with the moving part of walking, but also the staying aspect? And so one of the things that we've been doing over the last decades is actually leveraging the new development. Getting all those opportunities, not new funding, it's leveraging all the new development, getting good urban design to create that delightful walking environment. And then recognizing that the best transportation plan is a land use plan. So how do we weave in that walking aspirations with integrating with walkable destinations so that the two fit together? And then again, taking playbooks out of Europe, like looking towards reallocating, yes, car space, like to parklets, but then really diving deeper into the heart of our downtown for a place called Robson Plaza. We are now building this as a permanent plaza, place where you used to have cars, and we tried 3, 4 different versions over summer months to be able to land one that would be unique and good for the City of Vancouver. And we're not stopping there. We're starting also these kind of more micro plazas. This one on Butte Street, it's actually going to be eventually a greenway, but for now it's just extra public space in the heart of downtown Vancouver. And then, whoa, that is going a lot fast, and I only hit the button once. I'm sure they're going to help us out. But cycling, very, very similar to walking. Safe, convenient, comfortable, but the other part of cycling that you'll read in a moment is it's designing for people of all ages and abilities. So we're not designing for me, the male, the confident, athletic type. We're designing for my kids. I got 3 kids for new people cycling, women cycling. And so I'm sure we'll move, maybe they're back to me being in control here. There we go. Everyone get a little bit of rhythm. Here we go. Okay. And so for a long time, a lot of our bike network in Vancouver was hidden. It was off the main streets in these local street bikeways and greenways, and we actually started having a bit of a bike culture. But then we started getting a little bit bolder, and we started creating these places, and they were also walking and cycling being integrated together. And then there's partnerships formed for the next one, working with our park board, and then not only delivering a great walking and cycling environment, but a place for, again, the kids to stay and play. Again, that moving and that staying all at the same time. Then we had to decide, what does designing for all ages and abilities really mean? So work with me for a moment. Really simple rules of thumb, okay? So you can all be plangineers for the day. First one is, if the car volumes are low, then we as people cycling, kids and new people cycling, can share the road. Now, what does low mean? 500 cars per day. Not per hour, per day. That's only about 50 per hour. So if it's that low, we can share the road space with cars. If not, it means complete separation. That's the one that says physically separate users. And like, even in Vancouver, people are like, you're crazy, Dale. That's so many car travel lanes. That's so many parking lanes. But guess what? We've been doing this in sidewalks for people walking for hundreds of years. Let's now get to people cycling. So real simple. If it's 500 cars less a day, you can share the road. If not, rule number 2, physically separate. So how are we doing with that? We didn't even know how to do an intersection like this. This is a protected intersection. So we drew it up, we showed it, and then what's step 2, Dale? We built it. And we just built it the way we draw it up. And then guess what happens? 30% more people cycling in the first year alone with this protected walking and cycling. All 60,000 cars and buses still move through this intersection. And then we went to the bridge. The bridge had 6 lanes. We took it to 5. That wasn't good enough. Went from 5 lanes. We went down to 4. That's not good enough because there's another side to the bridge. So then we said, okay, let's do that protected intersection again. We said, that's not good enough. We need to create a network. So we did protected intersections. I don't know if you're going to go north. I don't know if you're going to go east. I don't know if you're going to go south. I'm going to give you a protected intersection in all directions. And then we're going to layer on safety. We're going to take the technology and the conflict analysis. Don't have time for that, but thank you, academia, because you helped us with this one. And then, of course, we're talking about micromobility and other shared mobility. So we got a bike share system up and running. We're actually right now, we're close to 200 stations, but I want you to see the magic of using the data. So this is what we did when we first had the 125 stations. We mapped it out, and then we layered on, okay, so who's using what stations and where they're using it? Guess what they're using? Remember that designing for all ages and abilities? Top 20 stations, they're pretty much all on that all ages and ability, that new cycling network that we just started creating. And now I would say if this was North America, you got to drink the Kool-Aid. So I don't know what the European expression is, but I'll just say you got to do more than build the infrastructure. You got to promote it. You got to market it. So we've done that. We create these report cards, but we also in Vancouver, guess what? It's not always sunny. It does sometimes rain. So we embraced it. We had my promotions team go out there with the parents and the new people cycling and saying, what does it look like to walk, bike, and roll in the rain? Because that's part of our context. So that was our campaign. The other one in terms of promotions is this, having more of that fun culture that Fernanda mentioned. So we're getting out more families out there, getting out at night and actually celebrating cycling. And so remember at the beginning, in honor of academia, remember that social connectedness? Well, part of it is also then engaging our residents, and where are you most often in your daily life, in your mobility, going to have a social connection? Walking or biking, but we measured it even better than transit, and so we can actually go back to our decision makers and tell them this. So to finish off, build it and they will come. So we had this walking delightful and the vibrancy, and people are coming, and then we had the cycling and all ages and abilities beyond safety and comfort, and people are coming. And so here's 3 decades of the growth, and you'll see 2 spikes. The first one was in 1997, when we had the first time when I said, remember how we've been prioritizing for decades, walking and cycling. The second lift in terms of our bike mode split came with this new idea of designing for people all ages and abilities. So again, you have to love the policy wonk in you too, because it's those policy levels that helped us as staff get a greater leap. I'll come back next year. You're going to see that. We'll have to have a climate emergency talk and watch that active transportation go off the charts. But do notice, we actually are past 7% of all daily trips. And so with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Dale. That was fascinating. I'm not going to even attempt to extract any particular highlight of it. It was really fascinating. But in the interest of time, now is your turn. And I am not going to close the session unless I get at least one question. So it's not time to be shy. So come on, who's going to ask that question? Who's going to make a comment? Somebody's going to have to do it. Otherwise, you don't go for coffee. I see a hand here. Give me another hand, perhaps. Come on. And another hand back there. May I ask you to go to this microphone and you to get ready already on the other one? And that way we, in the interest of our panel, your name and your affiliation would be excellent.
They can sing that.
Yes, my name is Jens Peter Hansen. I'm from Denmark and elected member of city council in a municipality. So my question is, how have you come along to convince the politicians about taking away space from cars and giving it to cyclists. I'm also a member of a board of the Danish Cyclist Federation, so I'm really impressed of how you're doing things in especially Ljubljana and in Vancouver. But in Denmark, when we try to do it, there's too many politicians, they drive cars themselves, and they say, oh no, car drivers will be mad upon us, and they have to vote for us. My horizon is at least at maximum 4 years, because that's the next election. How have you done it?
Excellent. So let me take the other question, just to make sure we gain some time here. Thank you very much, Councillor.
My name's Matthew. I'm from the private sector. I have a question about the length of the trips. So is there anything that you've done, so we've talked about safety, making it more enjoyable, but shortening that length of that trip or the amount of time that the consumers are out there, because essentially they are the ones that pay for it, right, ultimately with their dollars, with their time.
Excellent. So how do we talk to decision makers, to politicians, and how do we know the length? We know that, not everybody uses a bike if they have to ride it 30 minutes. So who wants to go? You're going to have to go really brief, and I'm going to ask you to already start thinking about what is your concluding remark, something like a tweet. Okay, so
if I start quickly, I think it should be time for right politicians. In Ljubljana, we have deputy mayor who is cycling. This is his lifestyle, and he is promoter, and he can convince even our mayor. So, but when it is done, let's say closing the city center for cars, it started in a clever way. So first, like refurbishment of the main street going to the city center. Then it was seen that it is not so bad with the people. Then this modernization was done, and the street simply never opened again. So it was in a clever way. But new services were designed, like bike sharing, vehicle on call, free of charge in this pedestrian zone. So, and I think they need these strategies, these long-term strategies, because there are so many arguments. If we do not do this, then we will be widening the highway ring around Ljubljana, and what will this bring us? Another cars and another cars. So the solutions are walking, cycling, and collective transport. So, and we must repeat this years and years and years.
Thanks, Liliana.
I think that in Mexico City, we have a former mayor that he established a bicycle mobility strategy. So all the different ministers had to accomplish this bicycle mobility strategy in 2008, and everything changed from that day on, I think. And last, we had a mobility law. I think that something that's really important in Mexico City is civil society. We have very active cycling groups that are demanding the government to have this infrastructure built, to have more cycle lanes. So having civil society, strong cyclist groups, and a mayor that believes in cyclists, and also we as public officers are cyclists ourselves, is the best result that we have had in Mexico City.
Thank you. Before I move to Dale, bear in mind that I'm going to give you another 30 seconds each for a concluding remark. So start thinking about it, because we're going to start reverse order. And let's try to address, if we can, the question about times, lengths of journeys, if we can.
I'll start with times.
Thanks a lot.
So what we found is that 5-kilometer to 8-kilometer trip is actually fastest in cycling in Vancouver. And then now that we have the bike share, those are actually taking up the lower kilometers. So really quite a healthy, time-oriented choice. It's just the most convenient for many. A couple of things I would add to my colleagues that hasn't been mentioned beyond having a bike-friendly mayor is also you need to do consultation. And in that consultation, whenever we have a big project, we always do a listening and learning. We don't even go out with options to start with. And then when we can, we go out with options. And then even when we have a final recommendation, we actually say, even though this is our recommendation, how could we mitigate it? It's not bulletproof in terms of the answers, but it gives a lot of opportunities for the community to engage in the process along the way.
It's interesting how you've all mentioned consultation, but we are only 5 minutes ahead of having to close this. I can take a very super quick question, if there's one, with very super quick answers from you, incorporated already in your concluding remarks. Do I have anybody who would be left sad if they couldn't a hand there. Please run to the microphone just to make sure that we can incorporate that question. And you're going to be super brief, and you're going to already give us your concluding remark in that. And that's going to be our panel. Yeah?
Hello, thanks for the presentation. I'm Eric from France. I'd like to know how you manage to park your bicycle near a station or in center of city. Do you understand my question?
So parking
the bicycle
availability
near
for
the
bicycles
station.
close to the stations.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Maybe I can talk about the bicycle parking. In Mexico City, the distances are really long. People spend 4 hours a day commuting. So we are planning to promote intermodal trips. We think that cyclists will be better for the first and last mile. That's why we're building 16 parking facilities in the peripheral areas of the city. They are 400 bikes each one, and the idea is that people can save money because the people in the lowest income zones spend 35% of their income in public transit, so they can change public transit for cyclists, for bicycle. And in the central zone, we have bike share. So the people can use the same transport card, and we know that Ecobici, 9 out of 10 trips are combined with public transit, BRT, subway, suburban train. So I think that's the best solution for any city, to promote intermodal trips whenever you have these type of big cities, like in Mexico City.
Thanks a lot. Fernanda. Let's keep it brief.
In
Yeah?
Ljubljana, I would say that we are in the very beginning about e-bicycles, so we are really doing big efforts to build a lot of safe parking places for the e-bikes. On park and night networks to push this intermobility. And I would say that bike sharing is very popular per capita. We are the best users in Europe. And of course, we are also doing in parking, but I think that in average you have to park. We have problems with e-bikes.
And just quickly, we don't provide the regional transit in Vancouver, and so TransLink, who does, they're getting better at actually adding bike parking. It's not free. I think it's, but you can tap in with your contactless transit system, and then you can actually have safe, secure bike parking for at the rapid transit station.
Thank you so very much. I mean, it's been fascinating to me to hear these 3 examples from 3 different geographies. I think, Dale, you've given us almost homework, being enablers of that social interconnectedness. And Fernanda, you've told us how a bike and cycling can actually change the perception of a city and how we experience the city. I think that thanks to Liliana, we've also learned that there are governance frameworks there, policy frameworks like the SUMPs that can actually help us and that can actually prioritize, as you were saying, Dale, that can be prioritized these modes of active transportation. And the 3 of you, you've told us that at the end of the day, it's very much about talking to stakeholders, talking to people, changing behaviors, going one step at a time, and putting your money where your mouth is, changing the investment towards the right type of infrastructure. Thank you so very much. It's been a delight. You don't go away because there's just a short coffee break. We need you back in the room not later than 10 to 4. Hopefully you will stay in the room to continue the conversations, meet with this panel, and keep it bilaterally. Thank you so very much. Join me in a warm round of applause. I think they deserve it. Thank you.
This one focusing on accelerating cities' transition to zero-emission vehicles. Can everyone hear me all right? In the back? Good. All right, so as Maruxa so kindly introduced, my name is Kristen Muslin. I am the senior editor of Smart Cities Dive. We are a digital publication that covers the news and insights on all smart city-related topics, from digital infrastructure to affordable housing. But if you receive our daily newsletter, you will know that 2 of the topics that we write the most about and that we think are incredibly important in driving smart cities are transportation and urban environment, which often impact each other, as is the case for zero-emission vehicles. So before I get into the definition of a zero-emission vehicle, I'm curious, by a show of hands, how many of you own or have ridden a zero-emission vehicle? All right, some of you. So as you'll know, ZEVs are broadly defined as vehicles that do not emit exhaust gas from their power source, and these can include battery electric, plug-in hybrid, and fuel cell vehicles. But the definition also includes some micromobility, such as bicycles, electric bikes, electric scooters, mopeds, and motorcycles. So under that expanded definition, how many of you have owned or ridden a zero-emission vehicle? All right, some more of you, good. So as you may have experienced firsthand, cities' transitions to ZEVs, both in their own municipal fleets and in incentivizing consumers and industry to switch to ZEVs, are resulting not only in fuel savings, but also in minimizing the impact of emissions on public health and the environment. And a quick statistic, a recent EU report found that transportation is responsible for nearly 30% of the EU's total CO2 emissions, of which 72% comes from road transportation. And ZEV adoption is one way that those emissions are being reduced. So while cities see the benefits to this transition, there are a number of challenges that they do face. How do you incentivize consumers and industry to adopt zero-emission vehicles, especially from a financial point? How do you keep up with the demand for charging infrastructure? How do ZEVs fit into the bigger efforts to push mobility as a service? And so to answer these questions, I am joined today by three brilliant panelists. First, we have Albar Sanchemans, who's the sales director of Silence, which designs, develops, and manufactures electric scooters and battery packs. You can come on up. Thank you. We have Trude Raken, the Deputy Director of the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, a collaboration of leading cities working to cut emissions by at least 80% by 2050. And we have Alvaro Urech, the Innovation Manager at Alstom, which promotes sustainable mobility through market systems and services, ranging from high-speed trains to modern infrastructure. Thank you all so much for being here. So in similar fashion to how we did the first panel, each of our panelists will give about a 10-minute presentation on the work that they do and the insights that they have around this topic, and then we will rejoin for an open Q&A, so please be thinking of those questions as you're watching the presentations. So Albar, I'll have you start.
Let's go. Hello, hello, yes. Okay, well, thanks to all. Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Maruxa, for the introduction. I just divide the presentation in three small parts. The first part is a brief introduction of our company, Silence. The second part, I'm going to share some numbers, some data about the electric motorcycle market, the European electric motorcycle market. And finally, I'm going to, yes, thank you. I'm going to talk about our two strategies in order to accelerate the transition to zero-emission vehicles. In this case, in order to start, our company, well, Silence is an electric vehicle manufacturer. We start our business in 2012. It was founded by Mr. Carlos Sotelo. And we started the development of electric vehicles. In 2014, after 2 years, two important corporations joined as investors, and it was La Caixa and Repsol. La Caixa is one of the most important banks in Spain, and Repsol is the first petrol company also in Spain. And it helps us a lot to continue our adventure. After that, in 2015, we launched our first product, the model S02, basically for fleets. After that, in 2017, we moved to a new factory, a new facilities with a production capacity of 10,000 electric vehicles per year and also per shift. And we launched our new model S03. Finally, this year, we have launched our first model for B2C, for private use, that we are selling it through our flagship stores located in Spain. We have today 17, and we are trying to create around 15 to finish this year. This is our team, this is Silence team. Carlos Sotelo, he's our founder. He's a technical engineer. He has been involved in the motorbike distribution for 23 years and the last 10 years in the motorbike manufacturing. In this case, we have 3 models today. Everything goes around our battery pack, what differentiates from our competitors. We have the S01 model with 100 kilometers range capacity. We have, which, as I told you before, we sell it through our shops. And we have the S02 model and the S03 model that we basically sell it to fleets. In this case, this is an example. This is one of our biggest clients. It's called Acciona. We are involved also in the moto sharing, and we are producing thousands of units every day in order to just give a mobility to the city centers. I'm going to share some data and some numbers that we have today. We closed 2018 with 37% of the market share of the electric motorbikes, and the market growth was around 81% last year in Europe. This year, with the data that we have from January to September, the electric motorcycle market has grown 78%, so we look forward to close with another great year. Finally, another good fact is that the motorbike market, in this case combining combustion and electric motorbikes, is growing around 8.5% over the previous year. So our target, in this case, Silent's target, is 72% of the market. That in total, it's around the total registrations in 1 year are around 1 million in Europe. How about the international expansion? We are really focused on that. It's based on our international expansion. It's based on the creation of a really solid distribution network. Today, we have 17 distributors in Spain and 15 in the rest of Europe. So we are, all of us, focusing on it. And also to manage on an efficient way our 2 lines of business, that it's B2B and B2C. This is some of our clients. In this case, in terms of delivery, we have Spanish companies like Arabinc, Correos, that is the postal service in Spain. We have Burger King, we have Amazon, we are working with Cultra, and also regarding the sharing, we have Acciona, SLoCaT, and some others. Just going back to the subject of this panel of how can we accelerate the process to the zero-emission vehicles, we have 2 strategies. The first one is based on our technology, our battery pack, that allows the user to charge their batteries directly from the motorbike, or you can take it and remove it from the motorbike with a trolley and just leave it in your home and charge it in your home or at your work. So we are putting things easier to the end users, and we don't want to depend on the public infrastructure because there's no many. The second strategy, the transition comes from our actual model, that is a hardware sales model, to a subscription business model. What we have today, we are selling our motorbike with our battery together. So what we want to do in the near future is to just sell the motorbike itself and to rent the battery for around 20 euros per month on a monthly basis. And it is our second strategy in order to compete against the big players in the market, that it will be the combustion motorbikes. In this case, this is one example. If somebody asks to Silent who is your competition, we always say petrol companies. We want to remove these motorbikes from the streets and to put electric vehicles everywhere. And, well, compared with others, here you have some numbers. We can be next to them, but in terms of price, we need to do something, and that's what we are going to do, our battery swapping through our battery stations, that we will do a test in 2020, and we will put 100 battery stations through all Barcelona in order to start this project of battery swapping and battery renting. And from my side, this is all. Thank you very much for coming.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's fascinating to learn about the global expansion of urban motorcycles and motorbikes. I don't know how many of you said that you're from North America. I'm from Washington, D.C., and it's something that is not very popular yet in our city, but we're starting to see more of that, and so the global expansion is very exciting. Also, I don't know how many of you can see, but Alvar has Silence branded sneakers on right now, so he's really completing the whole look. Great. So next up, we have Truda, who's going to speak about cities and the ways that they're decarbonizing how people and goods get around. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I come from the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance. And what is the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance? So we are 21 leading cities. It's a global network of the most ambitious climate cities in the world. What does that actually mean? Well, they have all 80 to 100% reduction targets by 2050. A lot of cities do that. What makes these cities what we call climate vanguard cities, though, is that they are right now implementing policies to reach those very ambitious targets. As you see, we have a fairly global north representation. That is because we have fairly strict membership criteria. And so far, the cities that actually meet them are located in the global north. We are continuously trying to have more global south members. What is the role of the climate vanguard cities? Well, they are leading the way. Why do we focus on these? Why are they appropriate for leading this way? Well, they tend to have both the political will and the resources to do so. But they also need to inspire and partner other cities. What these climate vanguard cities are doing is that they are transforming the urban systems, 100% decarbonizing the urban systems, meaning, in the end, they're changing what we think of as a city. But does it really matter if 21 plus global north cities reach carbon neutrality by 2050? No, it doesn't. That's why our cities are also looking for ways all the time to inspire what we call next wave cities. At the same time, these cities need their sort of rooms to have discussions. You think about when we talk about how we achieved something, we sort of present, oh, this is where we started, and then we did this, and then we ended up with the success. Well, usually, if you look into that process, it's going to be more like, okay, I went here and I talked to this guy, but then I had to go back here because I need to get like the green light from this one, and then I was able to go up here. So this kind of sort of winding road that you move through when you pass a policy, that is what our cities are talking about. And that is when you actually learn how they sort of overcome these challenges. And given that not everybody can be in the same room, looking for ways to inspire other cities is one way that we tried to do that was last year when we launched the Game Changers report at the Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco. So in this report, we have 7 game changers. Game changers are large solutions that we think cities need to develop and implement in their cities in order to reach carbon neutrality. That doesn't mean, oh, once you do this, everything is good, job well done, but it is a good start. This report differs from other reports that are often talking about what we did and what was so successful, going back to what I was just saying. How did they do it? What are the challenges that you as cities might run into in your own jurisdictions when you try to implement these large solutions? I'm not going to go into this report here, but I invite you to dive into it at carbonneutralcities.org. Instead, we're going to move on to transport because, of course, transport is one of those game changers that we're talking about, and especially electrifying transport. So I live in Oslo. Whenever I leave Oslo, I realize that the EV market is not as large as it is there. In Oslo's EVs are dominating the city streets. but the fossil market is still much larger. And the question that cities are asking themselves over and over is infrastructure. How do you provide enough infrastructure without the opportunity to charge? We're not going to buy EVs. If you can't charge it, then you can't drive it. Then the question is, who pays for what? How do you actually roll this out? And in this Game Changer report, we sort of list 4 key steps that we think of as necessary for cities to consider when they want to have a large charging infrastructure available to their citizen. Is, first of all, think about how much do you think you're going to need, and start designing for that. Not say, oh, I think we're going to have 10 this year. Start thinking about where you want to be. Second, thinking about rules for use and signage. This seems kind of mundane, but it isn't. Are you going to charge for charging? Is it going to be free? How long is it going to be free? And third is make the public investment first. That is to jumpstart the market. This is not to monopolize the charging infrastructure in your city. But because fourth, you need to partner with your utility and with industries to make that co-investment in charging infrastructure. But we're not all going to drive EVs. We're not just taking a fossil car out and putting the EV in. Most of us in cities, we need to walk, bike, or ride public transit. How do we do that? Well, as we've heard many times, both in this session and other sessions, is make it safe and easy to use. Otherwise, people aren't going to use it. We are creatures of convenience. We want whatever is most convenient to get us from where we are to where we need to be. So that means infrastructure that makes it safe to walk and bike. And it also means more frequent departures, clean and bright public transit vehicles, electrical buses, etc. But another thing is a question that we rarely ask ourselves, because often we say, how can we get more people to ride the bus? That's the question we ask. Well, what if we ask, who cannot ride the bus and why not? And if you look at like CNCA member city Portland, they have looked at how institutionalized racism actually keeps the African American community from riding the bus. As an African American man, you are more likely to be stopped on the street. So if you're walking, 32% of African Americans wait 32% longer for cars to yield to them in a crosswalk. You don't really want to walk. Also, the frontline communities in many cities is where you can't really access public transit. And we need to ask ourselves these questions: who are not able to ride? Because we want it to be something for all. But we're not just moving people around the city, we're also moving goods. You can sort of divide this into 2 main areas. The goods that we are consuming from businesses in our city, that is being transported in by heavy-duty vehicles. And then you have the last mile delivery that goes more into what we are having delivered at our doors. So if you look at freight with heavy-duty vehicles, one thing that you cannot do in a lot of cities is do nighttime deliveries. Why? Because trucks make noise and people are sleeping. Well, in CNCA city member Stockholm, they are looking into what if they drive electric trucks? Then they can make nighttime deliveries. A lot of businesses are open at night, hotels, grocery stores, etc. They can have deliveries done at night. That will ease up congestion. Also, for a plug-in truck, a plug-in hybrid truck, you can drive on the electric engine in the city and then switch to the fossil engine when you leave the city. This also makes a business case for the transporter, the freight company. Because yes, an electric truck is more expensive, but if you can use it 24/7, it is actually much easier to make that investment. And then last mile delivery. Our changing consumption patterns, shopping online, is clogging up the streets with vans, which leads to more emissions, congestion, and bad air quality. They're contributing to global warming and posing a local health risk and safety risk. It's kind of a puzzle that we think it's completely normal to have a shoebox delivered at our door by a van, and then we think it's a mystery that somebody's using an e-cargo bike to do the same thing. So we are supporting our cities in their work to look at zero-emission delivery hubs in London and also in our North American cities where they are doing testing, especially on using electrical cargo bikes. So in the end, we want both people and goods to move around the city in a safe and clean way. That's going to require a shift in technology, but also a shift in behavior. Thank you.
Thank you. I love bringing the conversation of moving goods into this panel because it's something, the explosion of e-commerce, one-day delivery, and food delivery has really affected our cities so much with congestion and more vehicles on the road that making zero-emission vehicles a part of that is going to be crucial moving forward. So last up, we have Alvaro, who's going to touch on how zero-emission micromobility and more traditional transit can complement one another.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Maruxa, for the introduction. Thank you all for being here. This is the last session of the day, and I have a goal. I've only seen 4 people sleeping in the room, okay? So my goal is to have at most 4 when I finish. Okay, so I'm checking, huh? I'm looking. Okay, just kidding. So what my goal is to give you a different perspective. We're all the time talking in this session about first mile, about last mile, but what happens in those miles in between? Okay, and how can we make this a real multimodal trip, connecting your first mile with your last mile? So I'm coming from Alstom. Probably many of you know about Alstom. And this is my 3rd year actually speaking in here, but this is the first time we participate in a sustainability session, which is something especially interesting for us this year because we've changed our strategy since last summer, and we want to be a global leader in smart and green mobility. So for us, sustainability has always been a key objective, but now it's even more. So some of the things we're doing, for instance, the hydrogen train. Probably many of you have heard about iLint, the hydrogen train. It's actually an electric train to be used in lines which are not electrified. So we bring the electricity with us, with hydrogen. We do efficient signaling, we do eco-driving, and I want to highlight another zero-emission vehicle, okay, which is an electric bus. If you have the chance, we have the Aptis bus here in the conference. It's outside between halls 1 and 2, or you can pop into our booth and ask for a ride, and they will give you a ride around the city. This is an electric bus designed by people who are not coming from the bus world. So if you look at it, it looks very much like a tram. And my colleagues would really explain many things about you. But we believe that sustainable mobility also needs to mean mobility for all. So we've had some experiences, for instance, with people with wheelchairs. When they board this bus with these wide doors, low floor, they say things like, hey, I'm boarding the bus using the same door that everybody else, and at the same time. So sustainable mobility, mobility for all. So specific session, talking about micromobility. This is my colleague Pablo, who is actually in the back there, so to see if his picture came out well. He lived like half an hour away from our office, So in the morning, instead of walking that half hour, he took his electric scooter, in a 7-8 minute ride to our office in the morning and in the evening. But his first mile was his last mile. But what happens if you're further away? So for us, we believe that micromobility, whatever it is, bicycles, the scooters, or there are new machines coming every day, so you're surprised. You go in the city and see something new. It's very interesting. It has really a role to play in the mobility of the city, but it's much more interesting when it's combined with other modes, adding the benefits. What we propose, of course, is to combine this micromobility with public transit, electric collective mobility, which we believe is the backbone of urban transport. Of course, urban railway, you know, and electric buses that little by little are being brought into our cities. This is the plan of Barcelona metro network. So even if it's a pretty dense network, but there are some spaces where you cannot reach easily with a short walk. And does it really make sense to make a network like this even denser? It's impossible to have a metro stop at the door of everyone and every time. So we need to look for different solutions. So we believe that multimodal, and I prefer to say multimodal instead of intermodal, because for me intermodal means one and then another and then another, and multimodal means, you know, they're all combined, they're all coordinated. So combining both worlds. I have a friend who's a commuter in train. He arrives into the city of Madrid, where we live, in train, and then he takes an electric bike. Maybe an Acciona one, like you were explaining before. But imagine that he arrives there, and there are no motorcycles. So what can he do? He has a problem. So we need to work on that. We need to be able to do multimodal coordination. I've chosen this picture because I don't know if any of you have done a relay race. I haven't, but I really like watching them because it's a perfect example of something really well done. But when you look at it, it looks easy, but there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of understanding between the teammates, there's a lot of training in there. So imagine that the runner comes and there's no one waiting there, or that you start running before the other one arrives, or that 3 runners arrive at the same time and there's only one there waiting. So you can take those examples to multimodal transport. It's basically the same idea. So there needs to be an understanding. There needs to be a way of communicating, a way of preparing for all this to work properly. And what we're proposing here, it's a tool. It's called Mastria. This is a picture of one of the screens of Mastria. Amongst other features of the tools, this is something that cities, that multimodal operators, authorities can use to understand people flow, to understand where the needs are, to plan, to react. Because you can plan, but things happen. Weather changes, there's some construction, there's many things. So you need to be able to in real time or close to real time, understand what's happening and offer the best solution with the different operators of public transport or electric motorcycles or e-scooters or whatever it is. As I was saying before, we are showing this tool in our booth. It's out there. It's close to this session. So with our experts, like Pablo, I was mentioning before, he's there. So if you're interested, don't hesitate to drop by and talk to them, and they will explain. So to conclude, as I was saying, please, you're invited to come. We'll show you some of the things we're working on related to green, sustainable, and smart. because we believe that combination of both things, green and smart, are the future. And that multimodal transport is something that we really all talk about, but that we need to be able to reach. And by this combination of green and smart, we're trying to help reaching this dream. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll take that. And I love, saying sustainable mobility means mobility for all. I think that's a really important message for everyone to take away. So as Maruxa did, I'm also going to say that y'all are not allowed to leave and get coffee and get drinks and dinner tonight until I get some questions. So does anyone have a question for our panelists? Would you like to come up to the mic, and we'll take maybe 2 at a time. And please introduce yourself and your organization.
Thank you, Liliana. You saw me before. I have one question for Alvaro. I really believe that collective transport is our future. So it was really impressive to see these e-buses and e-collective vehicles. But I have a question. What does this mean in prices in comparison with gas emission buses? And
in prices, you mean?
In prices, yes.
Price.
If we price.
Okay.
If we compare it with gas emission vehicles, and does this sale go on, or in your structure of sale, how much is it important, or is it just start?
Okay. So the e-bus, we have I think there's 8 cities already have ordered these Aptis buses. The biggest purchase was in Paris. I don't remember the number, but it's a quite large number for Paris. They have started production just now. So the one that you can see outside, it's a prototype. The production bus is coming. The price I cannot say from here, as you can understand, but I certainly invite you to come to the stand, which are with the people from the bus platform. Can give you a number. Whoever sees this bus realizes, because I was talking to them before, and people, the city makes an investment. Okay, I want to change to an electric bus, and we need to think about politicians. We were speaking about politicians before. Okay, the city brings money for electric bus, and the bus looks just like another bus. Just inside, it's different. If you look at this one. So, this is different, because it's wider, it's designed with everything on top. So it's designed from scratch, as you would design an electric bus. So I don't know the price, but I'm sure it pays off.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Cécile Jabaudon from Dominic, Brussels.
Would you mind turning the microphone more toward you? Thank you.
Yeah, so Cécile from Brussels. So we are talking about zero emission vehicles. Clearly, you build them with suppliers. My question is the following: do you impose any guidelines, or do you look in the carbon neutral strategy of your suppliers?
Anyone want to take that?
Asking who's
I mean, for me, it regards like Silence and you as Alstom.
Well, yes, of course, yes. We are trying to improve our quality controls with our suppliers. And we are trying to improve all the processes in order to be clean from the beginning point. So my answer is yes.
And in our case, we've been producing zero emission vehicles for years and years. Sustainability spirit is growing in the company for the last years. I don't remember the dates off the top of my head, but I think there's a compromise to reduce the carbon impact of our products in 25% up to, I don't remember. So including manufacturing, we're doing eco-design, we're doing carbon impact of suppliers, so the whole thing. So it's not just that we do an electric vehicle, is that we believe that the whole cycle needs to be aimed towards sustainability.
Good. Any other questions from the audience? Are you sure? All right. Truda, I'm going to turn it to you for a minute. I am curious, with your knowledge in the network that the network that you work with, the cities trying to reach their carbon emission goals, which cities are leading the way in electric vehicles, and how are they doing that in your mind?
Thanks. I guess it's sort of embarrassing to say that Oslo is leading the way, considering I'm from Oslo. Oslo has been lucky enough to be in a country where they're actually able to collaborate with the national government on the result that now more than half of all new cars registered are EVs. They do that in a couple of ways. If you buy an EV, you don't pay VAT, you don't pay road tax, both very high in Norway. You can drive in the bus lane outside rush hour, then you have to be 2 people in the EV to drive in the bus lane in the morning. You have free parking in the city. You have 1,300 charging points in the city. And that has led to a situation where you are actually on wait list for a year to get an EV. Up until a couple of years ago, the Tesla was the second largest market in the world in absolute numbers, which is odd for a country of 5 million people. And so that's how Oslo did it. But then we have cities like Minneapolis and Stockholm that are now looking at, okay, if not everybody's going to own an EV or a zero-emission vehicle of some size or shape, why don't we provide some mobility hubs? Because, I mean, back and forth to work, it's easy to use public transit. If you're going to do something else, if you're going to go to the beach, if you're going to go visit friends in the evening, you can use different types of zero-emission vehicles. And having the cities are then now piloting through a project that we're helping them support, see how, and this is just getting started, so I don't really have any results to show to you yet, but see how we, in our sort of spare time or our off time, time out of work, how would we use such a hub of zero-emission vehicles? So it would be scooters or e-bikes or EVs.
Good. And going back to something that you touched on a bit is charging infrastructure, which, on Smart Cities Dive, when we're writing about, especially in the US, the demand for electric vehicles, it's the chicken or the egg, problem of, do I encourage my, our residents to, buy an electric car, or do I make sure that the infrastructure is there first and then hope that people will then come onto the adoption of the electric vehicles? And I'm curious to hear from you, Alvaro, about the innovative charging infrastructure. I understand that Alstom has some road charging that can, help out both personal vehicles and I'm assuming buses and other vehicles. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, it's actually, we presented in September here in Malaga, in the south of Spain, a new system to charge. It's called opportunistic charging. It's for e-buses. It's actually designed for. It's actually designed for e-buses. It's inspired in something that we do for trams also, but in this case, it's for electric buses. There's an area in one of the stops of the bus where the bus stops, and there's some levers that come down, touch the surface, and then it's energized. And so what we get in that way is, as I was saying, opportunistic charging. So if you have an electric bus and it comes out of the depot fully charged in the morning, normally with the batteries that we have now, especially in countries with hot weather, so you need air conditioning and things like that, it won't last a day. So you need to go back and then recharge it for a few hours. And that, in terms of asset management, is not very good for the operator. So in this way, they stop at the end of the line, for instance, and 5 minutes or so that the bus is there, whatever time it's, depending on the line, you push a little bit the charge of the battery, and with the test that we're doing, the battery goes like that, and it would last a day. So it's a way to really improve the management of an asset, an expensive asset, like an electric bus. Not so expensive, but expensive anyway.
Good. And for a company like Silence that's working on, perfecting the battery itself, one thing that I have a background in waste and recycling, and one thing I think about with electric vehicles and batteries is the end life of those batteries and the disposal. How is Silence making sure that the batteries in your vehicles and also the vehicles themselves are being disposed of in a way that's sustainable and responsible?
Well, in this case, in Silence, we just test with some of our clients that after 15,000 kilometers of a motorbike running in the streets, it's losing only 3% of the capacity. So we don't know where is the end of this process. After that, our batteries allows to use it as a second life, and you can bring it to your home, and we provide an inverter to these batteries, and you can charge wherever you want, light, music, and everything. It's what we have in our booth here next to this pavilion, and you can come there to see how it works. So we know there is a first life, second life, and probably other lives.
Wonderful. Good. So we're reaching toward the end of our session. One question that I did want to ask, and this is a little bit more broad, but this is for all of you. Do you see a future where most, if not all, transportation in cities is zero emission? And what do you think is the main obstacle to getting there and achieving that?
I can go first. I think for personal cars, I think we've gotten fairly far getting people out of their cars. We still need to go a lot further. I think one of the key challenges is with heavy-duty vehicles, because we don't have that technology ready yet. Yes, we are looking at fuel cell technology. It's not, I should be careful what I say. It's not in the market yet, readily available, but also for filling up your hydrogen vehicle, because there are some safety issues connected with, and once we figure out that, then hydrogen can fuel the heavy-duty vehicles. I think that's one of the main obstacles. I think it's also for cities to see what is coming in the future, like drones, for example, for deliveries. How do you cities haven't regulated airspace before. How do you do that? And because they're used to regulating the curbside, they pretty much control the curb. But the airspace, how do you do that? How do you make it safe, for example? Because these technologies are coming, whether cities like it or not. And we're still going to be shopping online, even if everybody's thinking back 20 years ago and everybody's on Main Street shopping. We're not doing that. We're shopping online. How do we make that type of transport zero emission? While the city becomes more livable.
Anyone else want to share their thoughts?
Well, yes, I do. I do believe that we're on the right path. But for me, there's like two different aspects to this. One is sustainability in terms of zero emission and all that. And the other way is how we understand our flexibility and our ability to move. Because if I have a car and then I change the car for an electric car, then of course I don't emit so much, but I'm going to be in the same traffic jam. Okay, so there's those two aspects. So if we stay just on zero emission, on all those things, I think we're missing the point. We need to do a more inclusive way of how we move. Do we need to move? Where we move? How far? And all those things. So I think those two issues need to be combined.
Wonderful.
I totally agree with Alvaro. In this case, with only zero emission vehicles, we are not going to solve the problems in the cities because there is a lot of traffic and there are many other things that we have to improve and to change the mentality of who we are living in the cities.
Good. We have time for one more audience question, if anyone has one. Sure. Mind coming to the microphone?
Hi, Henrik Bindslev from University of Southern Denmark. I have to follow up on the question because the answer wasn't given. The batteries, and there are going to be more and more of them, we have to recycle them. It's not enough to say that they will have a second life, because second life just brings them out into further distance from those who can take responsibility. And we know from other new technologies that if we don't think about recycling at the point of design and manufacture, then it's going to be more difficult to recycle. I'm from Denmark, and wind turbines are dear to our hearts. Now, we're discovering at repowering, that means we're taking wind turbines down, that we had not thought about how to recycle the blades. And blades are horrible when they're chopped up into stamp sizes and put into landfills. So we need to find out how to recycle the batteries. Sorry, it was a comment, it wasn't a question.
Oh, that's okay, and I completely agree. It's something that we do a lot of coverage on. It's something that industry doesn't quite have the answer to yet, and especially with consumer and industry knowledge of recycling, lithium-ion batteries are such a problem right now, and consumers are just tossing them into the recycling like it's nothing, and then there's fires that are happening at materials recovery facilities at least across the U.S., and I know in Europe as well, and so it's a wonderful point. Thank you. Any other last-minute questions? All right, so I'm going to wrap this up by asking each of you to share maybe a 1-minute conclusion of the main takeaway that you hope the audience takes home with them tonight. We'll start with you, Alvaro.
Well, it's just the same message that I'm insisting on for this session. I believe that the solution needs to be multimodal. I think we need to change the way we think. We need to coordinate. We need to complement. Not try to do a 1 hour and a half scooter trip around the city. Just combine and take the best of each world. We need to change the mindset. We need to coordinate. We need to design things. For instance, design public transit so that someone with a bicycle can come in and bring it with him. Things like that. So for me, the message is clear. Multimodal is the way to go, but we need to work on it. It won't come for free. We need to work on it.
Thank you.
To me, it's, I want to focus on behavior change, because that is what we want. If we want the zero emission mobility, that's going to mean change for all of us. And everybody likes change as long as you're the one who was initiating it, right? But nobody likes change sort of pushed onto them. So to get to this livable city that we're all dreaming of with zero emission vehicles and no noise, etc., that's going to be some uncomfortable conversations. And we need to be able to have those conversations if we are going to get there. You have to involve all the people that you're going to be changing the lives of.
Yes, I just want to finalize saying that the last comment, it's true. In silence, in our part, we are studying on what to do after maybe 3rd lives or 4th lives of the battery, because at the end, it will be really important. So we have people studying this. And just to say that in silence, we are going to keep pushing to have sustainable and clean cities in the coming future.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. Let's give our panelists a final round of applause. And I'm going to pass it back to Maruxa for some final comments. Thanks. All right, yeah.
Thank you so very much. I'm not going to keep you very long. This was a phenomenal panel, really impressive. Terrific moderation job, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Just a few thoughts very briefly. I think we hopefully have demonstrated that green and smart mobility in cities is possible. I think that we have demonstrated that it's possible to avoid non-necessary motorized trips, that it's possible to shift from private ownership of cars to public transport, that it is possible to improve the efficiency of vehicles. I think that our eminent panels, both the first one and the second one, have given us ideas about solutions that exist out there, whether it is on active mobility, walking and cycling, whether it is on public transport, whether it is on the way we move goods around a city, whether it is on micromobility, solutions are there. Big challenges prevail and remain whether they are about technology, about infrastructure, about behavioral change, about recycling batteries at the end of several lives, and making sure that there is an element of equality amongst nations and we don't dump those end-of-life batteries in other places around the world. Certainly the challenges exist, but I think that we've been in a room that has got a title of mobility room. But to some extent, we have been having conversations about governance, about technology, conversations that pertain to the titles of many of the rooms. And I think that these conversations shows to us that transport and mobility, with its strength, is a transversal element. It's a driver for systemic transformation of our societies towards decarbonization. In order to use it as such, to maximize it as such, we have to conceive it as access to socio-economic opportunity and bold climate action. The last thing I want to say is thank you. Thanks to the amazing panelists, thanks to the co-moderator, Kristin. It's been a pleasure putting this thing together with you. Thanks to the organizers for bringing me the opportunity of being here today and for thinking mobility and including mobility so prominently in this Congress. We hope to see it next year again, isn't it? Such a prominent space for mobility discussions. And thanks to you for traveling, for sparing your days, for joining us, and for staying here for the afternoon. Safe travels back home to everybody. Use a low-carbon mobility option if you can. Thank you very much, and see you soon again in the corridors. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.